Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from ATB. neXt. ATB, Andre Tannenberger. Man, I don't even know where to start with this guy. He's kinda one of the biggest names in the Ibiza trance movement. The guy makes super commercial, radio-friendly pop trance songs and piano-heavy down-tempo and ambient stuff occasionally. The artist he probably comes stylistically closest to is, probably Armin van Buuren. Now, I've made fun of Armin quite a bit on this channel for being totally uncreative and making the same stuff over and over, even though I don't think his production style is bad at all, and he has 2 albums that I think are pretty good. But yeah, Armin's lack of creativity makes him a really easy target and fun to ridicule. In a lot of ways, ATB is a very similar producer, not only stylistically, but also in the fact that ATB is also kinda limited creatively. Maybe not quite as much as Armin, and he's been at it longer than Armin, but the parallel is undoubtedly there. Unfortunately for me, I also happen to enjoy ATB's music way more. See, the thing is, I first discovered ATB when I was just starting out in high school, and this dude completely dominated my freshman year. Like, he was kinda like Pretty Lights later on, was almost like everything I listened to in that little period from 2010 to 2011. Of course, by my sophomore year, he was kind of falling out of rotation and being replaced by artists like Monolake and The Orb and Hybrid that have held up a lot more consistently in my life. As a critic, there's a part of me that kinda wants to give ATB shit for a lot of the same reasons I give Armin shit, but the fact remains that ATB was too big a part of my life for me to really truly do that. I think for what it is, ATB's production is really fantastic. His radio-friendly upbeat anthems are usually catchy as hell. They got a ton of repeat listens from me back in the day. His down-tempo stuff was really emotional too and drew me in as well. This guy's first 7 albums have a nostalgia factor for me that Armin will never have. And that being said, things started to go downhill for him when he released his Distant Earth album, but well... I tell you what, how about I go down his discography so far? This is one of the first Ibiza trance albums, known for songs like 9 PM Till I Come, and a bunch of others. It's pretty solid overall if you're looking for some summer feel-good vibes. It's worth a shot. Not bad. This one starts up a formula he'd go on to use over and over later on, i.e. a double album of 1 disc of upbeat trance anthems and 1 disc of down-tempo and ambient material, something that totally didn't rub off on me on my most recent album, which you should check out if you haven't already. To be honest, Two Worlds is not one of his best. He'd go on to refine this formula later, but it's got some good moments. Good stuff. First and last track are the best, as well as You're Not Alone. Those are the highlights there. This is even better. He is using a lot of the vocals of Roberta Carter Harrison of the Wild Strawberries, and I really wish he would bring her back on more often, because this period of his career is probably my favorite. This one made my favorites of all time list. In my opinion, every song on here is great. If you only ever listen to one ATB album, make it this one. It's got a handful of good songs sprinkled all over the place, and it does have the benefit of having the first ATB song I ever heard, Justify, but not one of his better ones overall. Though this is where he started making the whole double album formula thing. 26 songs, and somehow not a single song I don't like. I mean, there's plenty I don't love, but this is one of his most consistently good releases to date, and I kinda can't believe he pulled it off this well at all. The first half is meh, really only 1 single I liked, and basically all my favorites are just gathered in the second half. This one is probably the first real dud in his discography. First half is not good at all, and second half is better, but also pretty meh. Which brings us to here. I could theoretically do a series on this guy. I don't think people would really want to watch that, though. If you happen to hate this guy, I will totally understand. Not gonna go out of my way to defend him, but I do still consider myself a fan. Fact remains, this guy has so freaking many songs that I like. He's just likely to get a pass from me despite his generic production style. But I couldn't fully excuse Contact. See, the problem is, ATB was changing his previously really spacious and beautiful pop trance production into something that sounded a lot flatter and not nearly as engaging or fun. Even the downtempo stuff moved in that more generic and flatter trance style as well. I mean, in retrospect, Armin's Embrace album did this as well, even though I was initially impressed for him changing up his formula at all. Probably why I haven't touched that album since reviewing it. But I digress. I suppose there were some decent singles on Contact here and there, but none of them were particularly catchy, except for Raging Bull, which was probably the first ATB single I outright disliked. I'd rather be a lover than a raging bull is just not a line you base a trance song around. Ugh. These lyrics are supposed to be really generic and metaphorical so that you feel with them but don't think about them hard. I don't know. But it's because of this that I wasn't particularly excited for this latest album, neXt. I mean, I was still interested because there was a chance that Contact was just a fluke. I knew I would not get another No Silence at this point, and it wasn't likely I'd get another Future Memories either. I do still miss the days when he brought in Roberta Carter Harrison. She has one of the most unmistakably unique voices and worked off of ATB's production fantastically well, but hasn't made another appearance and swept away from Future Memories, and she's not on this new one either. Real shame there. But oh well, I decided I still have to give this new ATB album a fair chance. I had a pretty good idea what to expect. He did the double album thing again, so maybe there'd be more songs that I'd like than the last one. So I jumped in. How'd it turn out? Well, it was better than Contact. I think the first half is probably the best first half of an ATB album since Future Memories, actually. Granted, the first half of Distant Earth and Contact were very much not good, and the last trance anthem single from ATB I thought was worth anything was Twisted Love. But here I'd say there were actually 5 songs from the first half of this album that I would willingly come back to. Maybe even 6. So, I like Pages, the first one. That one's pretty catchy. I like If It Takes All Night. That one's got a pretty cool drop, if not the most catchy. A Place Like You was pretty fun. Connected is probably the best track on the first half here. There's some really great melodies on that one. And I'm Here also had a nice summery vibe that kind of reminds me of some early tracks of his like The Fields of Love and maybe Feel Alive from Trilogy. And I suppose Message Out to You. That one was alright. That was a pretty fairly catchy one. The rest on here is kind of a mixed bag. There's definitely some interesting moments, but often not really in a good way. Like, Close Enough to Touch has some interesting vocal manipulations. He chops some bits up. He even pitch shifts and auto-tunes. Like, you know, interesting, but really does not play to this dude's strengths at all. And Flash X sounds like it was produced by a completely different person. Like, just weird synth tones, sounds very odd and not in a good way either. Though for whatever reason I didn't find it to be that terrible. The melody was alright, I guess. And Remember When. That track has, I shit you not, trap hi-hats. On an ATB song, trap hi-hats. Why? The rest on the first half is mostly just kind of forgettable. Some moments where he returns to that flatter sound from Contact and just ends up sounding like Avicii in some areas. So yeah, definitely not a great first half, but it's at least got more standouts than his last 2 did, so it was a pleasant surprise. But what I found to be especially disappointing was that the second half was kinda boring and forgettable. This is undoubtedly the least interesting ambient half of any ATB album to date. I mean, it's not bad or anything either. I mean, it's still some good emotional ambient downtempo stuff done in his usual style, but very little of it is much to write home about. A lot of it runs together and it's just not very interesting. Weird as it is to say, given my expectations, I was actually more impressed with the first half of this album than the second half. Now the second half is at least a lot more consistently good. There weren't any tracks on the second half I didn't like. Just most of them didn't stick out to me. Like, there were a couple of good ones. I like Route 66. That one did get me worried that he was going to make the down-tempo half more trance-like he did on Contact. But the rest ended up being the typical ambient stuff he usually does. Emotional and smooth synth pads, pianos like guitars, occasional beats and vocals, but most of it just sadly doesn't do anything to stand out. I suppose I might half be spoiled by the especially strong second half of Distant Earth and the much more tolerable second half of Contact, but yeah, most just have nothing interesting to discuss. Green Sand has some tambourines on it, that one's interesting. Back Home is our usual straight piano ballad. There's an ambient version of When It Ends, It Starts Again from the previous album that only reminds me of how meh that album was. And there are some with nice melodies like Restart and Pulsar and Project X. Also, Within a Dream has some slightly more interesting sounds on it, but that's really all I have to report. I don't know how I feel about neXt as a whole. It's okay, but I bet you it would have been a lot better if it were just cut down to one album with like 12 or 13 songs. You could have like the 6 songs I liked from the first half. You add a bunch of the ambient tracks that I mentioned too. So if you cut down to just that track listing, you could have something up to the standards of, say, Dedicated. ATB could have made one of his best albums in a long time had he cut out a bunch of this filler. But as is, it's just an okay album overall. At least it balances out. It's good tracks in both halves, but I don't know. This album's not likely to change your mind if you already don't like ATB. I'd be much quicker to recommend Addicted to Music, No Silence, or Future Memories before I'd recommend this one. Those are a lot more consistently good than this one was. I think had you cut this album down to just the good stuff, it would have been one of his strongest albums in a long time, but it's not. I'm happy I sat down to listen to it and hear that even on half of the album, ATB still totally got it, and that Contact was probably just a fluke, but I can't honestly recommend this one in its entirety. I'm overall feeling a 6.7 out of 10, but if you cut it down to just the good stuff, then you can upgrade it to a 7.5. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.